Hi, I'm Janelle with Lasting Impression Horsemanship, and this here is Sunny. He is a Tennessee Walker Fox Trotter cross. He's about 8 years old, and I just got him in yesterday to start training him. He's been having some issues. It sounds like he's pretty disrespectful. The owners just purchased him a couple months ago, and about a month after they got him, they started having a lot of problems with him. Initially, he was really good and did fantastic, but about a month after getting him, he started to have issues where he was kind of like bucking and just spooking at stuff that he was perfectly fine with before, and having issues with trailering and just a completely different horse, they said. So they were wondering if he could have potentially been drugged before they bought him and brought him home. And apparently there's a drug on the market now that can stay in their system for about a month. And it's mainly supposed to be used for horses that are like on stall rest, and it's supposed to kind of take the edge off of them, but it's being used for horses that are being put for sale and given to them to help sell them. So they're wondering if that might have been the case with him. I don't know, but we'll work with them and find out what we're dealing with here. So one of the first things I do with these guys is I start by establishing with them the herd dynamic. I need him to understand that I'm going to be his herd leader, and he's going to have to look to me for guidance. So just like horses do in the pasture, the way they go about doing that is they will move the other horse's feet forwards, backwards, left, and right. If you ever see the main alpha horse in the pasture, they'll pin their ears, and the other ones will go ahead and walk away from them, because they know if they don't move their feet, they're either going to get kicked or bit, or something else is going to happen to them that isn't going to be very pleasant. So with his size and my size, the big difference there, it's pretty dangerous if he were to think that he can be the alpha horse over me, because he can do a lot of damage to me because I'm so much smaller than him. So I need to let him know from the very beginning that I'm going to be his alpha horse to him. And I need him to look up to me and look to me for guidance. So that's one of the first things I need to establish with him. Next thing I'm going to establish with him is my personal space. I'm going to have a safety bubble that is as far around me as my stick can reach. And I need him to understand that this here is my personal space, and he is not allowed in it unless I were to invite him in. And I have to keep that boundary here. I need to keep that black and white. So anytime he tries to cross into my space here, every single time he does it, I need to make sure that I correct him every single time, because anytime you don't correct them, that is going to start making things gray for them, and they'll never know when to start taking you serious. So if you don't keep your boundaries with them black and white, that's when you're going to have a horse that's constantly going to start challenging you and never know when to take you serious, and they're going to stop listening to you. One thing that happens, and I see it quite often, it kind of drives me nuts a little bit, is quite often I'll see people lunging a horse, and they'll be lunging them, and they'll be asking them to trot. And the horse is sitting there trotting around them, but they're still sitting there clucking to the horse the entire time the horse is trotting. And right there is what you're doing, essentially, when you're doing that, is you're desensitizing the horse to the cue that's supposed to tell him to trot. So you're being counter-effective there. Where if you were to cluck to them and they started trotting, and then you stop clucking, and then if they were to break down to the walk, and you started clucking again, that's going to be a black and white picture for them, that they know that, oh, well, apparently when she clucks, it means I'm supposed to trot, because if I broke down to a walk, she clucked for me again, and I had to go back up to the trot, and then it stopped. So quite often, that's one of the things that I see people doing, is they're basically desensitizing their horse to a cue that's supposed to make them go forward. So in my mind, it's not really fair for these horses to have to try and figure that out, and for people to get mad at them for something that's kind of our own fault of doing. So being able to communicate effectively with your horse is kind of the main thing that we're looking for, and being able to understand them on a level that they understand and we understand, and just learning how the horse perceives things, or this was the word I want to use, how they interpret things. I guess it's more or less what I'm looking for, is what we need to understand as humans. And we have to understand that horses are horses and they're not people. They don't have the emotional capacity that people do. A lot of times I'll have people come in and I'll be like, okay, you gotta take your horse and you have to like tap it with the stick on like the neck or butt or something like that. And they're like, well, I don't want to do that because I don't want them to not like me. And that's not going to happen, because horses don't have the emotional capacity that humans do. So if I were to take him and tap him on the butt, that's going to be no different than if a horse in a pasture were to go ahead and bite a horse on the butt. If you see them in a pasture, they're not going back and forth at each other and not liking each other after the fact, because 2 seconds later they might be eating hay next to each other and act like nothing ever happened. Where people, if that were to happen and they got in a fight, 2 seconds later, they're probably not going to be having a conversation at a dinner table, eating food, acting like nothing happened. So their emotional capacity isn't the same as a human, so we have to understand that they're a horse and not a human. We have to treat them like a horse. And horses treat us just like another horse. We're just a funny looking horse to them. That's all we are. They're not going to treat us any different than any other horse. So that's another thing that we as people have to understand, or make sure that we keep in mind when we're working with them, that we're working with a horse and they're going to treat us like a horse, so we have to treat them like a horse and communicate with them on the same level that they communicate with each other. So the way they communicate is through body language, with like pinning their ears and different, I guess, ways that they change their body, and that's how the horses communicate with each other. So that's what we have to do with the horsemen. We have to understand how to interpret their body language and how to change our body language so they can understand what we're trying to tell them. So the first thing, like I said, we're going to establish with him, let him know that this key thing, this area here is going to be my safety bubble, and this can move wherever I go. So if I were to just create pressure here, and if I'm walking in front of him, I just want him to know that I'm owning this area, and this safety area here that I own here is mine. So I can move, and this can move with me. And all I'm doing is I'm just waving this back and forth in a rhythm. It has to be in like a rhythm, or they don't understand it, because horses learn from the release of pressure. And pressure is like anything that makes them uncomfortable. So it can be like energy, like this, here's some sort of energy, and it makes them uncomfortable. As you can see, it made them start walking away. So they learn from the release of that pressure. So how do they know when they did the right answer? They learned that the right answer was when that pressure stopped, and they did the right thing then, obviously, when that pressure stopped. So knowing that is important to get your timing correct on when you release your pressure. So your horse knows when they're doing the correct thing and when they're not. Because if you release your pressure at the wrong time, you might be teaching your horse that it's doing you might be teaching your horse to do something bad and not need to, or just teaching them something wrong if your timing is not right. So getting your timing correct takes experience and just is something that kind of comes with work and practice. So it's not something that usually happens overnight. Some people might be better at it than others, but if you work at it hard enough, you'll eventually get it, that where it comes pretty natural to you and you don't really have to think about when you go ahead and release the pressure with these guys. So I'm going to go ahead again and let them know that my safety area is going to go ahead and move here. So I'm just going to start putting pressure here, and he's understanding that, okay, she's moving and this area is moving with her. So he seems to understand or grasp that if I make this movement here, that it needs to stop. So if you don't keep your rhythm up here, and say your rhythm isn't like consistent, and you're going and like doing like tap, tap, and then do like pause, and like a tap, 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 and then like a pause. Every time you do that pause, there is a reward to them. You might not mean for it to be a reward, but if you stop with your rhythm, that there is a reward. So say I'm going to try and get his hindquarters to go away from me, take a step away from me. So he just did it, and it's almost like he can speak English, huh? So, well, the first thing I do is I change my body language. Like I said, horses communicate through body language. So instead of having a relaxed posture, I'm going to get a more aggressive posture. So what I like to do is I'll kind of like crouch forward and get almost like if they were in the wild, I kind of look, trying to get more of like a crouched appearance where if you were like a lion and you wanted to take a bite out of the butt, then they know that that's more of an aggressive stance and they're supposed to move their feet. And then once they do what they're supposed to, then they know that, then I'll just stand back up and go in my relaxed posture and they'll know that that was the correct answer that they were supposed to do. So let's see how he does here. And I did work with him once before I got him. There was one day that I went and kind of evaluated them for the owners at their house to see if they thought that I could do anything with them. So he might kind of remember some of this from when I worked with them that one time before. So we'll see what happens when I do this. He might just do it off of the body language, but a lot of times you have to take different steps and increase your pressure until you get a response. So let's start with just increasing my body language, using the body language. Okay, he's not doing anything. And usually my shoulder and his shoulder are kind of lined up there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift my stick up here and I'm just going to tap the air. Okay? And he took his one step, disengaged his hindquarters, and I'm going to reward him for that, let him know that was the right answer. And I always rub him here on the point of the hip to let him know that that was the correct thing and they can stop moving their feet. So I'm going to ask him again, make sure that he starts to understand this. I'm going to start body language. Okay, good. So he's starting to learn that, okay, I have to listen to her body language there. I didn't have to tap the air. So let's begin. See if he'll learn just the body language. And he's doing it. So good. He must have remembered then some from the first time I worked with him a little bit. But if he were not to move his feet, even though I tapped the air, the next thing I would do is I would just, he gets 4 chances from tapping the air. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. If he doesn't move, then I go ahead and just tap his hip. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and continue to increase the amount of pressure I use until I get a response from him. And if he were to step backwards behind this other foot with this one, I'm going to continue the pressure that I'm at until he crosses in front of this foot with this one. Because I want him to fully disengage his hindquarters. And in order to do that, he needs this foot to cross in front of this one. Because if they're going to take off running, he would basically trip over his other foot if he had his foot in front there as he's crossing over. Where if he crosses behind, he could still take off and run without tripping himself. So he's not disengaging his hindquarters when he's stepping behind that other foot. And what we want to do is we want to teach him to disengage his hindquarters because we want to teach him that basically that's going to be your start of your one-range stop there. So he learned that. Basically, that's the one way of going about yielding your hindquarters. Another way that I like to do and teach him is from using the lead rope here. I'm going to use the lead rope as if it were almost the rein. So I'm going to just take this lead rope here, and I'm going to lift it up towards his ear. And what I want this to do is I want this to kind of connect to that right rear foot. So when I lift this up, I want his right rear foot to take a step to the side. So if I lift up, there he goes. He took a step to the side. I lift up, and take a step to the side. And the minute he takes a step to the side, you see I drop my hand and I release it. And he's being pretty responsive to that. And it doesn't take much pressure for him to feel any of this. I mean, I'm not even really pulling that much. You can feel all this movement on this halter. And I like my horses super light like that. So it doesn't take much pressure at all to go ahead and do that. So I'll ask him one more time. Lift up. What happens? And he started backing there, and that wasn't the correct answer, so I just kept up with my pressure until he took the step sideways, and then I went ahead and released it. Sometimes you might have to help him a little bit if you were to go straight from the neck here and go straight up. Sometimes the way it pulls on the halter, they might think you're trying to back them up. So sometimes you have to kind of when you're working with a halter, you sometimes have to pull their head a little bit out to the side and then up to let them know that you're trying to get them to yield their hindquarters and not back up. Because some of the sign or the cues and stuff can be a little bit confusing to them until they really catch on the differences, because some of them are pretty close. Like when we teach them the flex and stuff, you'll see how it's pretty close to each other. So we'll ask one more time, see what he does. And there you go. Okay, so he's got that pretty good on this side. So another thing we have to know is what we do on one side of the horse, we have to do on the opposite side. Because we have one horse here in body, but really we have two horses we're working with here in mind. So we have a left horse and a right horse, and each horse don't know the other one exists. So if you have ever been, let's say you're at like a show arena or something, and there's like a sign on the fence, and your horse decides that that sign, they think it's going to eat them. So they start spooking at it, going one direction. And in the other direction, they were perfectly fine with it. They didn't make anything of it. But the minute you change directions, they thought it was going to eat them and kill them. If that's ever happened to you, that's because the horse going one direction that it was okay with, so say that was the left horse was completely okay with that sign, but the right one thought it was going to eat them. So even though the horse already seen it before and was perfectly fine with it, they can't communicate that back and forth to each other. They don't know the other horse exists. So what you do on one side of the horse, you have to go ahead and do on the other side to teach that one as well. So just understand that when you're working with horses, that you're working with two horses, not just one. I've also found that when you're doing stuff, teaching things on one side and finishing it before you work on the other side. So say you're trying to teach a horse something on the left side and they're just starting to finally get it. I would, in your times about up from you working with them that day, I would just kind of stop there before you start with the other side and not try and do both sides at the same time, because you're going to accomplish more by just working with one side at one time than you are going to be working on both sides a little bit. So keep that in mind as well when you're working with horses too. So I yielded his hindquarters with both the stick here and then the rein. So the next one I'm going to do is his forewarders, and I'm going to want his front feet to cross over. So one of the first ways I do it is usually with my stick. I'll just cross it in front of me, and my eye and the horse's eye are going to be kind of lined up. I'm just going to tap the air and walk directly into him. And what I'm looking for is him to cross straight over with that horse, or with that foot that's closest to me, and keep away. He's licking and chewing there, so he's taking that moment right there and digesting the information that we just did there. So I'm looking for him to cross over this foot, and we're disengaging the forequarters, just like we did with the hindquarters there. And a lot of horses that are disrespectful, they will be super pushy with their shoulders, and they'll be super sneaky about it too. And people won't even realize they're doing it. And what'll happen is they might be focusing on yielding the hindquarters with them, and so they'll be like looking at them this way and trying to get them to yield the hindquarters here. And all of a sudden, that horse will go ahead and they'll take this front shoulder and they'll take a step towards them, even though the person is sitting there focused on the hindquarters, and he moves his hindquarters and disengages his hindquarters, but that horse took like a half a step towards them, but the people don't usually catch them doing it. So in the horse's mind, they're thinking that, yeah, I moved my hindquarters and stuff, but I still was able to push into you with my shoulder. So unless you catch them doing that and reprimand them for doing that, you yielding their hindquarters isn't going to have much of an effect at all, because in their mind they still got you, and they're still able to kind of make you move your feet, because usually when you do this, your feet are kind of moving towards their hindquarters. So to them, if they're able to make a half step this way and your feet are moving that way, they're like, oh, I was able to make you move your feet. So they're like, I'm going to be the boss of you, in their mind there. So that is definitely something to be very conscious about when you're working with horses, is what your feet are doing and what your feet are telling them. Because that's one of the main things that horses look at, is they pay attention to what the feet are doing. They'll go ahead and they're very conscious of if they're able to move your feet, or if your feet are backing up from them, or anything like that. So if he were to come in and crowd me, and I were to just kind of back up like this, he's going to be like, oh, I got you, is what he's going to think. He's like, so anytime he comes and crowds into my area, he's going to go ahead and think that, oh, I can make her move her feet here. Another thing to kind of keep in mind is horses are going to challenge any person that they see, or any new person that they see. So, like I said, I worked with him once before, so he's kind of has it in his mind that he's going to be submissive to me a little bit here, and I've already established that I'm his herd leader from working with him one time before, like I think it was about a month ago. But even though it's been that long, he still remembers that I established with him at that point that I was going to be his herd leader at that point. So if you were to bring another person and hand them the lead rope, that doesn't necessarily transfer the respect and trust to that person. The lead rope does not do that. That person has to earn that from that horse. If that was the case, it would make our lives so much easier as a horse trainer than being able to just train the horse and be like, okay, here it is. But we have to go ahead and not only train the horse, which majority of the time is the easy part, but we have to go ahead and train the person how to go ahead and work with the horse and be a good horseman with them and create a good bond with them. So as long as Charisma's okay, she's here, I'm going to kind of show you what that means when I hand the rope off to him, and I'll show you kind of how much different he's going to act with her than he will with me, and you'll be able to see some of the challenging things that he'll do with her that he didn't try with me on camera. So, are you okay doing that? Okay. And I'll kind of walk you through it here. And Charisma's been just kind of coming out, and she's helping me and just wants to kind of learn some of this horsemanship process and stuff. So she's just been here, and she's got a kind of challenging horse like him at home herself. So this will be good practice for her. So we'll start with doing the yielding of the hindquarters. If you want to do maybe on the left side here, and we'll get him to go ahead and step his hindquarters that way. So we'll come on this side here and get his hindquarters and step that way. Okay? Yep. So your shoulder's the curve of his shoulder. There you go. Good. And you see how she's keeping her hand up kind of by his eye there? We want to do that because if he were to try and push into her, if her hand's up by his eye, then she can kind of block him from trying to push her over. Because sometimes horses will be super pushy, and it's just kind of a safety thing to do. Because you keep your hand up there by their eye, and you can always bump their head away if they're trying to push into you. So go ahead and ask them then. So she's going to get a more aggressive body language first. She's going to crouch forward, not doing anything. So she's going to wave his stick, right? Okay, so he's backing up, which is in the correct answer. So she's going to keep the pressure up. And there you did it. And she released the pressure then. And she can go ahead and rub the hindquarters and let him know that he did the correct answer there. Good. All right, we'll go ahead and ask again. See what he does this time. Good. There you go. And I don't know if you know this, but Charisma, I mean, and everyone's going to do it a little bit different, but Charisma, when she makes this stick here, when I do it, I usually will start about like this with my pressure, which isn't quite as much as what she was using. When she did it, she waved it a lot bigger, which is a lot more energy than what it would be like this. This isn't as aggressive of a posture as what it is if someone's waving the stick like this. So it just increases the amount of energy that she has towards the horse. So that's something to kind of keep in mind is how big you make your wave. So if you start small, your next step could always be just increasing your wave length there too, and then going and tapping him on the hindquarters and seeing if he responds to that. So just kind of keeping that in mind is something else I just wanted to point out as well. All right, let's see how we do it again. Good. Good. Very good. All right, let's go do the other side. And hold on, because no, wait a second. This is another thing that a lot of people do is You remember what I was saying about moving your feet? What I want people to do is instead of you crossing over on the other side of your horse, you should make your horse move its feet to get you in the right body position. So if she was standing here, I would just take that rope and bring them back on this side so she didn't have to move her feet. So let's say you do that and get you in the right position and just move the horse's feet to do that. Yep. So just bring his head over here. Yep, good. Bring him forward a little bit more. You just stay contacted with your shoulder there. Good. All right. And just put your hand up here. Good. And move forward. Good. Okay, good. And you see how she kept that same pressure? He started to back up, which wasn't the right answer, but she just kept that same pressure up because he was trying. He was trying to look for an answer. So even though they might not have the right answer yet, just stay at that exact pressure until they give you the right one. And then once he made the crossover in hindquarters, that was the right answer, and she stopped the pressure there. So we'll do it one more time on this side. We'll leave him up here a little bit. Oh, one thing here I can point out here. So you see how when she asked him to come forward, he was really reluctant to come forward. He's kind of like pulling on this rope. She really kind of had to tug at it. If you have a horse that's feet are kind of stuck and don't want to come towards you, what you can do is you can pull them off balance to the side and unstick the forequarters and just get them to kind of pull them off balance. And then ask them to walk forward like that. A lot of times it will help get them to start walking forward if you have a horse that kind of like braces up and tries to stop. So keep that in mind too. That's a little bit of a trick to go ahead and fix those sticks of things. All right, go ahead and see how we do it this way. Good. All right, we board them. Answer. All right, let's try the forequarters and see how he does there. And it doesn't matter which side, whichever. And have you just move his front end over and get him to cross over in the front there. Okay? So just cross your stick in front of your body and we'll tap the air. Like this. Over here, his eye is lined up, you just tap it like this and walk towards it. There you go. Up and walk in. So keep your body in the correct position and wait until you get that right answer. Walk, 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 walk. Keep going. Almost. Keep going, keep going, keep walking, keep walking, keep walking, walk, 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 walk. Keep going, he's almost got it, keep going. He's stepping behind, not in front. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Get your body to the side a little bit. Keep going, keep walking, 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 walking. Keep going. Push, 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 push. You almost got it, keep going. Hold that shoulder a little bit, maybe. Get his shoulder moving a little. Yep. Almost crossing over. You keep stepping behind, not holding, disengaging behind the front. Very good, Melody. Very good. So as you can see, he's not as responsive to charisma as he was to me. He was very hesitant about fully disengaging that forequarters. He doesn't have the same type of respect for charisma yet and trust with charisma as he does with me. Because one time I did work with him, we kind of established all that, and he's like, okay, she's a good enough for a leader there that she'll be able to keep me safe. So the way I was able to establish all this is by doing exactly what we're doing right now, is moving his feet forward, backwards, left, and right. So by the time Charisma gets done working with them, she'll have his trust and respect that way by being able to move his feet forward, backwards, left, and right without him giving much of a difficulty at all. So we'll go ahead and try that again. And just kind of watch your body position and make sure your eye kind of stay lined up too, because if you get too far forward, he's going to try backing up. And if you get too far back, he's going to try walking forward on you. So if you kind of keep your eye and his eye in the same spot, you're going to be more successful at getting him to cross that foot over. Okay? Let's go ahead and try again. Here you go. Good, good, good. Get close. There it was, right there. Good. Very good. Just give him a rub there, let him know you did the right thing. And I always rub him, let him know that's the right answer. You see how he's thinking and chewing? He's just going ahead and digesting the information and figuring out that that is the right thing. And so I give him a minute and let him think about it there, and we go from there. So those are just a couple things that, or that's kind of mainly the two of the first things that I established with them is moving their hindquarters and forequarters, and then just establishing my safety area. Those are going to be the main things that I'm going to kind of start with the horse, because that's what you need to do in order to get their respect. You're going to move their feet forward, backwards, left, and right. The next thing I would do is make sure that I can back them up as well. So there's different methods of going about it. You can do the direct pressure and just kind of pull back on the line here. Just like here over this. That's going back out. You did that very well. I don't know if it'll be that soft with Charisma or not, but we can see how it responds with you. Go ahead and see if it'll be that light with you. Back. He wasn't quite as light as he was for me, because I barely had to lift the clip up, but he was still really light. So he did that very well for her. So that was still really good on his part. So we're able to back his feet up. The next thing is we're just gonna I teach them to move them forward as well. So I kind of drive them forward, and that's more something I practice when I start doing the lunging aspect of it. But we'll probably wait and do that more our next clip, and we'll kind of progress every single day, and I will just go through his entire process here and let you know kind of how he continues to progress, and then explain the process and why I'm doing things, and hopefully be able to help people out that are having issues with a disrespectful horse, and help them get the horse more respectful for themselves, because once you have a horse that's respectful and trusting, then you're going to have a way better relationship with your horse. And I don't know if you can notice this right now, but you see how Sonny is sitting there looking at me, like he just was? Well, horses that they'll often look to the person that they think is their leader. So if he thinks I'm a better leader than Charisma, which I work with him a little bit longer than Charisma, so if he thinks that I'm a better leader than her, he's going to continue looking to me for advice and seeing what I'm going to tell him to do, more so than Charisma. So until Charisma gets the same amount of respect that I have from him, he's going to continue to look at me for guidance and see what I'm going to ask his feet to do next. So anytime you're working with a horse, they're going to look to the person or the horse that's got their respect the most. And if you don't have their respect and they don't think you're able to keep them safe, they're going to go ahead and be like, hey, I'll do the job then. If you're not going to be able to keep me safe and alive, then I'll take matters into my own hand, and I'll be the alpha horse, and I'll keep myself safe, and I'll keep myself alive. And that's when you have a horse that starts giving you issues, because they're using the reactive side of their brain and not the thinking side of their brain. when horses are born and when they're in the wild, the reactive side of their brain is very large. And that's the reactive side is when you have their flight or fight response. So the first thing they're going to do is run and ask questions later. And then after that, once they stop and they feel safe, they'll be like, okay, what was that? Because they don't want to be like, stop and think about it and be like, oh crap, something just ate me, and then they die from it. So their flight response is very quick in the wild when they're first born. So when we domesticate horses, we really train a lot of that flight response out of them, or that reactive part out of them. And even I just had a foal this spring, and it was amazing to me the amount of just reactive nature that they have just coming out of the womb, just naturally, like as soon as they hit the ground, they're just that reactive nature. It just amazed me how much was just there as soon as they were born, more so than like the thinking side of their brain. So they have both sides. When they're first born and they're in the wild, that reactive side is very large, and that's the side that they mainly use. But as you domesticate them and work with them and get them to move their feet and use their thinking side of their brain and start thinking about what you're asking of them, you start exercising that thinking side of their brain, and so that side of their brain starts getting larger and the reactive side starts getting smaller. So then they're going to start going towards using that thinking side of their brain more so than the reactive side of their brain, and that's what you're trying to accomplish as you're working with horses. So getting that reactive side smaller, you're never going to get it completely out of them, but you can get it so they go to it less often and they're not as apt to head to that way of thinking or frame of mind, because that reactive side is when things start getting super dangerous and they'll just plow you over, and they just don't think, they're just trying to survive at that point. So keeping that in mind, so if you have like a super spooky horse and stuff, what you have to do is you have to get them using that thinking side of their brain, and by doing that, you move their feet forward, backwards, left, and right. And I'll go over that on another video as well. So if you have any other topics that you would like me to kind of go over and discuss, feel free to leave some recommendations in the comment or what you would like to see. It gives me kind of some ideas of what else I can cover for you guys that you would like to see. Otherwise, I'll continue to video his progress with me, and you'll be able to kind of watch him as he progresses through his training. I think I have him for about a month, so hopefully, well, I know he'll make quite a bit of progress in that month, and I'll be able to work with his owner as well at some point and get them both working good. But we'll teach him all his exercises and everything beforehand and go from there. So like I said, I'll keep you updated on his progress, and until next time, just remember that horses are horses and not people, so treat them like a horse. I'll talk to you later. Bye.